At the heart of Jerusalem's old city stands what billions of Christians revere as the most sacred site in their faith, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. For nearly 2 millennia, pilgrims have journeyed to this ancient shrine, believed to be the final earthly resting place of Jesus Christ. The church encompasses both Golgotha, where tradition holds Jesus was crucified, and the tomb from which Christians believe he rose on the 3rd day after his death. This is sort of X marks the spot, noted archaeologist Dr. Hebert describes. Edicule, the epicenter of Christianity for almost 2,000 years. The significance cannot be overstated. This is where Christianity began. Reverend Griffith Jones captured the emotional weight. You tread where Jesus trod. You see where Jesus died and was buried and the tomb from which he rose. The impression it makes is unforgettable. Yet this cornerstone of Christian faith faced imminent physical collapse. The marble edifice protecting the tomb, known as the Edicule, had deteriorated to a critical state. You could see that it had started to buckle, observed Dr. Hebert of the National Geographic team documenting the restoration. The danger was so severe that experts feared for visitor safety, with Professor Maropoulou warning that pilgrims might have been in danger. To prevent catastrophic failure, an unprecedented convergence of science and faith was required. For the first time in centuries, the tomb would need to be opened, potentially revealing secrets hidden since the time of Jesus himself. The impending scientific investigation stood poised to either confirm or challenge one of Christianity's most cherished beliefs. Is this truly the tomb of Christ? A sacred structure in crisis. The Edicule, the ornate marble structure encasing what many believe to be the tomb of Jesus, had reached a critical state of disrepair by 2016. For decades, a metal cage of steel beams had surrounded it, installed as an emergency measure to prevent collapse after a 1927 earthquake. This unsightly scaffolding spoke volumes about the deterioration hidden beneath. Built in 1810 after a devastating fire, the current Edicule represented merely the latest iteration. In a long history of structures built to protect the sacred site, the building was originally made of wood, explained Dr. Hebert, which isn't really great if you've got hundreds of thousands of pilgrims with candles. It's burned down about 5 times. Centuries of pilgrimage had taken their toll. Millions of visitors, the constant heat from devotional candles, centuries of water infiltration, and the effects of regional earthquakes had critically weakened the structure. Marble panels were separating from their core, mortar was crumbling to dust, and the load-bearing columns were deviating dangerously from vertical alignment. The situation was so dire that local authorities threatened to close the site entirely. Yet addressing the structural problems faced a unique challenge: the church's administration. By centuries-old agreement, known as the status quo, the site is governed by 6 different Christian denominations: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian, Apostolic, Syrian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, and Coptic Orthodox churches. Any change to the structure requires unanimous consent from all controlling entities. This complex governance is famously symbolized by a wooden ladder placed against an exterior window in the 18th century, which remains untouched today because the denominations cannot agree on who has authority to remove it. Such deep-seated divisions threaten to prevent the necessary restoration work, even as the structure deteriorated further. The convergence of science and faith. In this critical moment, an interdisciplinary team from the National Technical University of Athens, led by Professor Antonia Maropoulou, was granted permission to assess and restore the endangered monument. The Greek team brought considerable experience in heritage conservation, having previously worked on significant historical structures, including Istanbul's Hagia Sophia. The culture and heritage of Greece is contributing to world heritage, Professor Maropoulou explained, and we are proud of having developed the know-how and innovation to diagnose, to plan, and to protect cultural heritage. Securing unanimous agreement from the church authorities required exceptional diplomatic skill. Dr. Hebert observed there were a lot of very set minds at first. A lot of very somber faces of people who didn't want to budge. The scientific approach, methodical, evidence-based, and transparent, ultimately convinced the patriarchs to approve the ambitious restoration plan. The team deployed cutting-edge, non-invasive technologies to assess the structure without damaging its historical integrity. Ground-penetrating radar allowed scientists to visualize the interior construction layers without physical intrusion. It's like when you go to the doctor and see the baby inside the body. It's like an ultrasonic scan, explained Dr. Lapropoulos, detailing how the technology revealed hidden structural weaknesses. Three-dimensional laser scanning created precise digital measurements of the entire structure, documenting every stone and architectural element with millimeter accuracy. We use the handheld laser scanner to document all the stones that were removed from the Holy Edicule. We did 255 scans of the stones, reported technician Elisabeth. Laboratory analysis of mortar samples revealed far more extensive damage than initially feared. Water infiltration had compromised the structural integrity throughout. Cavities honeycombed the walls and foundations, and binding materials were disintegrating. The project faced another significant constraint. Religious authorities mandated completion before the Easter Holy Fire ceremony, giving the team just 9 months to complete a monumental restoration. The historical context of Christianity's most sacred site. Understanding the archaeological significance of the tomb requires examining its complex history. According to biblical accounts, Jesus was crucified and buried near a place called Golgotha, outside Jerusalem's city walls. First-century Jewish burial customs involved placing the deceased in rock-cut tombs with stone benches where bodies would decompose. After decomposition, bones would be collected and placed in small niches or ossuaries. This, in fact, is what the tomb of Jesus would have looked like, explained Professor Taylor, indicating a typical first-century Jewish tomb. The body would be left here on the bench, and there are little niches where people would put bones after. The body had been completely decomposed. The site's history took a dramatic turn in the early 2nd century. Emperor Hadrian, seeking to suppress Christianity, ordered the area leveled and built a temple to Venus directly over the venerated location. Eusebius, in the 4th century, writing in Greek, says, "And they built a gloomy sanctuary to the impure demon of Venus to bury the Saviour's cave under such foul pollutions." Taylor noted. This shows that the Romans wanted to deliberately bury the tomb of Christ and deal a terrible blow to Christianity. This act of suppression paradoxically preserved the site's location in cultural memory. Taylor explained how skepticism often gives way to an appreciation of oral tradition. As I've grown older, I'm more accepting of tradition being passed on by older people and memory continuing on. The decisive moment came around 326 CE when Emperor Constantine, the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, ordered the Venus temple demolished and the site below excavated. Historical accounts describe how Constantine had the entire hillside cut away to expose the tomb. For centuries, historians believed Constantine had completely destroyed the original tomb structure, leaving only the burial bed intact. This version of events had become archaeological orthodoxy until the restoration team made their first startling discovery. Unexpected discoveries beneath the marble. Just days into the restoration project, as workers removed marble panels from the Edicule walls, they encountered something completely unexpected: solid bedrock. This wasn't the expected masonry supporting the structure, but the actual walls of the original first-century burial cave. We never in our life imagined that would reveal the sides of the original cave that surrounded the tomb, Dr. Hebert recalled with evident excitement. History told us that that tomb had been flattened and opened up to the sky. But the sides of the cave were still there. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the stunning find. Significant portions of the original rock-cut tomb remained intact, extending upward on both sides of the burial bed. This revelation meant that for 1,700 years, pilgrims visiting the site had actually been standing inside the original burial cave without realizing it. The discovery challenged the long-standing narrative about Constantine's complete destruction of the tomb structure. Rather than demolishing the entire cave, it appeared he had more selectively modified it, perhaps removing the ceiling and upper portions while preserving lower sections of the walls. As restoration work continued, the team discovered an even more concerning structural issue: water infiltration from beneath the church. We discovered that the rainwater from the Christian street above, 10 meters above Jerusalem Street, were draining underneath the Holy Tomb, as well as the sewages of the whole complex, Professor Moropoulou explained. This perpetual moisture had been degrading the foundation and walls for centuries. When investigators mapped the underground water channels, they discovered something else entirely unexpected: a network of carefully constructed tunnels beneath the tomb. I was not expecting a well-built ashlar masonry tunnel underneath the tomb of Christ, Dr. Hebert reported during his underground exploration. This is completely unexpected. A well-built tunnel stretching dozens of feet towards the center, towards the tomb of Christ. These tunnels, hewn from the same bedrock as the tomb itself, appeared to be an intentional passageway rather than water channels or modern archaeological trenches. It appears to be some sort of escape tunnel or entry tunnel, Hebert hypothesized. This is something completely unknown. The water damage presented a critical challenge to the restoration process. The team needed to inject liquid mortar through tubes into the structure to stabilize it, but this created a new risk. Without proper barriers, the liquid cement could flow onto the holy bed itself, potentially damaging the most sacred element of the site. This technical challenge forced a momentous decision. For the first time in centuries, the tomb itself would need to be opened. Opening the sealed tomb. After extensive negotiations, the church authorities granted an unprecedented permission. The marble slab covering the burial bed could be removed for exactly 60 hours to implement protective measures against the cement infiltration. For the first time in living memory, human eyes would see the actual surface where tradition holds Jesus' body was laid. At sunrise on October 26, 2016, a small group gathered inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The doors were locked, and National Geographic's team was present to document this historic moment. With reverent care, restoration specialists removed the marble slab that had sealed the tomb for centuries. The atmosphere was very hushed inside, Dr. Hebert recalled. They closed the doors of the church and locked us in. As the slab was finally lifted, the team's expectation of seeing a clean limestone surface was confounded. Instead, they found a layer of debris and fill material that had accumulated over centuries. It was as if we had opened up what was underneath your bed that hadn't been cleaned in the last 2,000 years, described Dr. Hebert. It was the slow accumulation. It was the dust of ages. Working meticulously, the team cleared away the accumulated material Underneath, they discovered another stone slab from an earlier period, this one bearing an unexpected feature, a cross engraved into its surface. "That was a surprise," Professor Moropoulou remarked. "When we opened the tomb and we saw the engraved cross, we said, this might be a cross of the era of the Crusaders. If this cross dated to the Crusader period, 11th, 13th centuries, it would significantly complicate the historical narrative. The Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem nearly 1,000 years after Christ's death, far later than Constantine's 4th century identification of the site. The dating of this cross and the mortar securing it to the burial bed became critically important to authenticating the site's historical claims. While maintaining their focus on the structural restoration, the team carefully collected mortar samples from beneath the cross-inscribed slab. These would be subjected to rigorous scientific analysis back in Athens, potentially resolving centuries of debate about the tomb's authenticity. Scientific evidence and historical authentication. The scientific dating of materials from the tomb addressed long-standing skepticism about the site's authenticity. In the 19th century, Protestant scholars had questioned the Holy Sepulchre's claims, noting that the site was inside Jerusalem's current walls, while Jewish law required burial outside the city. This led some to propose alternative locations, most notably the Garden Tomb, discovered in 1867. The Garden Tomb, with its rock-cut chambers and nearby hill resembling a skull, potentially matching the biblical Golgotha, attracted significant attention. When you enter into this tomb, you'll see that it's divided into two small chambers, explained local guide Philip. The first chamber would have been primarily used as a preparation site, where they would prepare the body for burial, and the inner chamber is the place where bodies were buried. However, archaeological dating demonstrated that the Garden Tomb was carved during the Iron Age, approximately 800 years before Jesus. What we know is that Jesus' tomb was newly cut. This is what the New Testament tells us, Professor Taylor noted. It's very unlikely it was a reused Iron Age tomb. The discovery of the Crusader cross at the Holy Sepulchre raised similar questions about that site's authenticity. If the cross and its mounting mortar dated to the Crusader period, 1,000 plus years after Christ, the connection to Constantine's 4th century identification would be severely weakened. After months of laboratory analysis in Athens, Professor Moropoulou's team announced their findings. The mortar samples securing the cross-inscribed slab to the burial bed dated to approximately 345 CE, precisely matching the historical accounts of Constantine's identification and monumentalization of the site. This scientific evidence strongly supported the traditional narrative that the tomb had indeed been identified and preserved in the 4th century, just 300 years after Christ's death. It is a cross that represented the Christian faith, Professor Moropoulou explained, suggesting that Constantine's team may have marked the sacred site with this symbol upon its discovery. That was a new era for Christians. It's not by chance that it happened in Jerusalem. This archaeological confirmation represented a remarkable convergence of scientific evidence with historical tradition, the strongest physical evidence too, supporting the authenticity of Christianity's most sacred site. Restoration completed and legacy secured. With just 3 weeks remaining before their Easter deadline, the restoration team completed the monumental task. The tomb had been safely resealed after documentation and sampling. Liquid cement had stabilized the internal structure and straightened the leaning columns. The unsightly steel cage had been removed, revealing the Edicule's architectural beauty, and centuries of accumulated grime had been meticulously cleaned from surfaces. We delivered it intact and preserved, clean, coloured, vivid, and alive monument. As it is the tomb of Christ, Professor Moropoulou stated with justified pride. But her team's vision extended beyond immediate repairs. The question is, how shall we preserve it with sustainability in the centuries to come? To ensure long-term preservation, the team implemented several forward-thinking measures. Engineers conducted seismic testing using shake tables to evaluate the structure's resilience to earthquakes, a critical consideration given Jerusalem's location on a fault line. We came up with proper measures to strengthen it, so in the future it's not going to be vulnerable to any earthquake, confirmed Professor Spirikos. National Geographic experts created comprehensive digital documentation of the site using photogrammetry and laser scanning technology. We used a technique which builds 3D maps from tens of thousands of photographs, explained digital specialist Corey. If the Edicule were to start to settle into the ground, or collapse, or be destroyed again, the church has been destroyed many times over history. We at least have the best digital copy that technology can make right now. This digital preservation also democratizes access to this sacred site through virtual reality applications, allowing people worldwide to experience the tomb without physical travel to Jerusalem. The successful restoration project represents a remarkable convergence of archaeological science and religious tradition. By applying cutting-edge technology with respect for sacred heritage, the team not only prevented the physical collapse of Christianity's most revered site, but also uncovered compelling evidence supporting its historical authenticity. The scientific dating of materials to Constantine's era provides the strongest archaeological evidence, yet that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stands on the site historically identified as the burial place of Jesus of Nazareth. While archaeological evidence cannot confirm theological claims about resurrection, it has verified the historical continuity of this site's veneration from the earliest centuries of Christianity to the present day. As pilgrims continue their journey to this ancient shrine, they now walk on ground not only hallowed by faith, but also authenticated by science, a testament to how modern archaeology can illuminate rather than diminish our connection to the ancient world.